The desert wind howled like the voices of ancient spirits across the vast New Mexico wasteland, carrying tales of death and abandonment on its scorching breath. But on this particular day, it would also carry whispers of an impossible rescue that would challenge everything the frontier believed about honor, mercy, and the bonds that can form between sworn enemies. Eagle Feather crested the rocky ridge at sunset, his paint horse moving with the fluid grace of a predator scanning for prey. The Apache warrior had been tracking a band of cattle rustlers for 3 days, following their trail deeper into the Chihuahuan Desert where few men dared to venture. At 27, he possessed the patience of a seasoned hunter and the deadly skills of a war chief's son, but nothing had prepared him for what he was about to discover in the shadow of Devil's Backbone Mesa. The broken wagon appeared first, a splintered wreck of wood and iron scattered across the sand like the bones of some massive desert creature. Torn canvas fluttered in the wind like funeral shrouds, and the skeletal remains of 2 horses lay bleaching in the merciless sun. But it was the figure beside the wreckage that made Eagle Feather's blood run cold. A woman lay motionless in the sand, her once fine dress now tattered and stained with dust and dried blood. Her pale skin had been burned red by the desert sun, and her lips were cracked and swollen with thirst. But what struck the warrior most powerfully was the unmistakable curve of her belly. She was heavily pregnant, perhaps only weeks from giving birth. This was no ordinary abandoned traveler. This was a life hanging by the thinnest of threads, and within her another life that had never drawn its first breath. But the most shocking thing was what Eagle Feather discovered when he approached her still form. The woman's eyes fluttered open as his shadow fell across her face, revealing irises the color of winter sky. She tried to speak, but only a rasping whisper emerged from her parched throat. In her right hand, she clutched a small silver locket, and pinned to her torn bodice was a yellowed piece of paper, a notice offering a substantial reward for her safe return. Elizabeth Morrison, Eagle Feather read aloud, the English words feeling strange on his tongue. Wife of Colonel James Morrison, Fort Stanton, missing since September 10th, reward, $500 dead or alive. The irony wasn't lost on him. Colonel Morrison was the same military officer who had led the brutal campaign against Eagle Feather's own village 2 winters ago, the man responsible for the deaths of dozens of Apache women and children, the same man who had put a bounty on Eagle Feather's own head and sworn to see him hang from the gallows at Fort Stanton. And now Morrison's wife lay dying in the desert, carrying his unborn child. Eagle Feather knelt beside the woman, his warrior's training warring with something deeper, a code of honor his grandmother had instilled in him long before he learned to kill. Water, Elizabeth whispered, her hand moving protectively over her swollen belly. Please, the baby. The Apache warrior's dark eyes swept the horizon, calculating distances and dangers. Fort Stanton was 40 miles north through hostile territory. His own people's hidden camp lay 30 miles southwest, but bringing a white woman there would mean exposing his band to terrible risk. The desert offered no shelter, no mercy, no second chances for those who made the wrong choice. But as Elizabeth's eyes began to close again, as her breathing grew shallow and labored, Eagle Feather made a decision that would echo through both their lives like thunder across empty plains. And that's when everything changed forever. Without hesitation, Eagle Feather lifted Elizabeth in his powerful arms, marveling at how light she felt despite her pregnancy. Her head rolled against his shoulder as he carried her to his horse, and he could feel the rapid flutter of her pulse beneath skin that burned with fever. Every instinct screamed at him to leave her. She was the enemy's wife, a symbol of everything that had been taken from his people. But his grandmother's voice whispered in his memory, "A true warrior protects life, especially when that life cannot protect itself." He fashioned a makeshift shelter using his blanket and some broken wagon wood, creating precious shade in the inferno of the desert afternoon. From his waterskin, he carefully dripped liquid between Elizabeth's cracked lips, watching as she struggled to swallow. Her eyelids fluttered with consciousness, and when she looked at him, there was no fear, only desperate gratitude. "You're Apache," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind. You should hate me. Eagle Feather's jaw tightened as he continued giving her water. Hate is a luxury I cannot afford when life hangs in the balance. My husband, he's done terrible things to your people. I know what he's done. Tears began to flow down Elizabeth's sunburned cheeks. I tried to leave him. I was running away when the wagon broke down. The horses, they bolted in the storm 3 days ago. The warrior studied her face, reading the truth in her pain-filled eyes. This was not the pampered officer's wife he had expected, but a woman who had suffered, who carried shame and sorrow as heavy as the child in her womb. But you haven't seen the biggest surprise yet. As Eagle Feather tended to Elizabeth's injuries and tried to bring down her fever with wet cloths, she began to speak, haltingly at first, then with growing urgency. She told him about the night raids her husband ordered against peaceful Apache camps, about the scalps he collected and displayed in his office like trophies. She spoke of the children's cries that haunted her dreams and the way Morrison's eyes grew cold and distant whenever she questioned his methods. "I found his journals," Elizabeth whispered, her hand gripping Eagle Feather's arm with surprising strength. "Records of every attack, every innocent person killed. He's planning something worse, a final campaign to eliminate every Apache band in the territory. I was taking the evidence to the territorial governor when—" She gestured weakly at the wreckage around them, then doubled over as a sharp pain shot through her abdomen. Eagle Feather's eyes widened as he recognized the signs: labor pains, weeks too early, brought on by stress and dehydration. "The baby's coming," Elizabeth gasped, terror and determination warring in her voice. "It's too soon, but it's coming." Eagle Feather had assisted at births before. Apache women often gave birth on the trail or in dangerous situations, but this was different. This child carried the blood of his people's greatest enemy, yet it was also innocent of its father's crimes, and the woman bearing it had risked everything to expose the truth about Morrison's brutal campaigns. For the next 6 hours, as the desert night settled around them with its symphony of crickets and distant coyote calls, Eagle Feather became a midwife to his enemy's child. He boiled water over a small fire, tore clean strips from his spare shirt, and spoke softly to Elizabeth as her labor progressed with frightening intensity. "I don't even know your name," Elizabeth panted between contractions, her fingers digging into the sand. "Eagle Feather," he replied, pressing a cool cloth to her forehead. "Son of Chief Standing Bear, guardian of the sacred springs." "Eagle Feather," she repeated, as if testing the name on her tongue. Will you help me save my baby? Even though your husband murdered my sister and her children?" Eagle Feather's voice carried the weight of old grief. "Even though he burned our winter stores and left my people to starve? Yes, because this child is not responsible for its father's sins." Wait, don't miss this crucial detail. As dawn broke over the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Elizabeth Morrison gave birth to a daughter in the arms of an Apache warrior her husband had sworn to kill. The baby emerged small but fighting, her tiny fists waving in protest at being thrust into a world that promised her nothing but conflict and divided loyalties. Eagle Feather cleaned the infant with the gentle precision of a man who understood that life was sacred regardless of its origins. As he placed the baby in Elizabeth's arms, he saw something that made his warrior's heart skip a beat. The child had her mother's blue eyes, but her skin bore the warm bronze tone that spoke of mixed heritage. "She's beautiful," Elizabeth whispered, tears flowing freely as she looked at her daughter. "But James will never accept her. He'll know she's not his." The implications hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Colonel Morrison was a man who valued reputation above all else, who would rather see his wife and child dead than acknowledge a baby who might carry Apache blood. "There's something else," Elizabeth said, her voice growing stronger despite her exhaustion. "I know where Morrison keeps his gold. Payment from cattle ranchers for his protection services. $30,000 in a hidden safe. Money that could help your people survive the winter, maybe even relocate to safer territory." Eagle Feather studied her face, searching for deception, but finding only desperate honesty. "Why would you tell me this?" "Because my daughter deserves to grow up in a world where children aren't murdered for the color of their skin or the blood in their veins. Elizabeth's voice carried a fierce determination that reminded Eagle Feather of Apache mothers defending their young. Because sometimes the only way to stop a monster is to make sure he can't feed his hunger for destruction. The sound of approaching hoofbeats shattered the morning quiet like gunshots. Eagle Feather's head snapped up, his hand moving instinctively to his knife as dust clouds appeared on the horizon. Multiple riders, moving fast and with purpose, a cavalry patrol, no doubt searching for Morrison's missing wife. "They'll kill you if they find you here," Elizabeth whispered urgently, "and they'll take my baby back to him." Eagle Feather looked at the infant sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms, then at the approaching dust clouds that meant discovery and death. In that moment, he made a choice that would define both their futures. What you're seeing now is nothing compared to what happens next. "Can you ride?" Eagle Feather asked, already lifting Elizabeth and her baby with careful efficiency. "I can do whatever it takes to protect her," Elizabeth replied, her voice steady despite her pain. Within minutes, they were mounted on Eagle Feather's horse, the baby secured between them in a makeshift sling crafted from his shirt. As they rode away from the wreckage toward the hidden canyons where his people made their temporary camps, Elizabeth told him about Morrison's plans, detailed maps of Apache territories, schedules for coordinated attacks, even the locations of sacred sites the colonel intended to desecrate to break the spirits of the remaining bands. "I memorized everything," she said, her arms protective around their child. "Every detail, every date, if we can get this information to the right people." "We?" Eagle Feather asked, surprised by the inclusion. "I can't go back to him. Not after what I've seen, what I know. And I won't let my daughter grow up believing that her worth is measured by how well she serves men like her father." Elizabeth's voice carried a steel that reminded Eagle Feather of Apache war mothers. "If you'll have us, if your people will accept us, I want to help fight back." The journey to the Apache camp took 2 days through terrain that would have challenged experienced riders, but Elizabeth proved tougher than her delicate appearance suggested. She never complained about the harsh conditions, the rough sleeping arrangements, or the meager rations Eagle Feather shared with her. Instead, she asked questions about Apache customs, learned words in his language, and told stories to her baby in both English and the few Apache phrases she managed to master. When they finally reached the hidden canyon where Eagle Feather's band had taken refuge, the reception was everything he had expected: suspicion, anger, and demands for explanations. His fellow warriors saw only the enemy's wife and child, symbols of everything they had lost to white expansion and military aggression. But then Elizabeth did something that left everyone speechless. Standing in the center of the Apache camp with her newborn daughter in her arms, Elizabeth Morrison began to speak in broken but determined Apache, words Eagle Feather had taught her during their journey. She told them about her husband's planned attacks, about the locations he intended to strike, about the gold that could fund their resistance or relocation efforts. "I know you have no reason to trust me," she said, switching back to English while Eagle Feather translated. "I know my husband has caused you unspeakable pain. But this baby, your baby too in a way, since Eagle Feather helped bring her into the world, she deserves a chance to grow up free from the hatred that has consumed her father." She knelt in the dust and placed her daughter gently on a blanket, then reached into her bodice and withdrew a folded document, Morrison's detailed battle plans, stolen from his private safe before her escape. "I offer you information that could save your people's lives," she continued, her voice carrying across the silent camp. "I offer you the location of enough gold to buy safe passage to Mexico or Canada. And I offer you my loyalty, if you'll accept it, in the fight against the man who has brought so much suffering to this land." The Apache elders conferred in hushed tones while Elizabeth waited, her hands folded calmly in her lap despite the tension crackling through the air like lightning before a storm. Finally, Chief Standing Bear, Eagle Feather's father, stepped forward. "You would turn against your own kind?" the chief asked through Eagle Feather's translation. Elizabeth lifted her chin with quiet dignity. "I would turn against evil, wherever I find it. My skin may be white, but my heart knows the difference between justice and cruelty. Your son saved my life and my daughter's life when he could have left us to die. I choose to honor that debt. And that's when the most incredible transformation began. Over the following months, as Elizabeth's daughter grew strong and healthy in the mountain air, the young mother proved herself in ways that gradually won over even the most skeptical members of the Apache band. She learned to cure hides, to identify medicinal plants, to weave baskets with the intricate patterns that told stories of the people's history. Her hands, once soft with privilege, grew calloused from honest work. More importantly, the intelligence she provided proved accurate and invaluable. 3 separate cavalry attacks were anticipated and avoided, saving dozens of Apache lives. The gold she had promised was recovered in a daring raid that left Morrison's forces understaffed and demoralized. With their new resources, the band was able to establish a more secure camp deeper in the mountains, beyond the reach of regular patrols. Elizabeth's daughter, whom the Apache women named Little Sky for her bright blue eyes, grew up bilingual and bicultural, equally comfortable with Apache traditions and the white world her mother had rejected. She became a bridge between worlds, carrying the best of both heritages while rejecting the worst. As for Elizabeth herself, she found something in the Apache community that she had never experienced in white society: respect earned through action rather than birth, worth measured by contribution rather than appearance, and love that transcended the artificial boundaries of race and culture. One evening, as they sat together watching Little Sky play with the other children around the communal fire, Elizabeth turned to Eagle Feather with a question that had been growing in her heart for months. "Do you think she'll ever understand why I chose this life for her instead of the one she was born to?" Eagle Feather watched the little girl laughing as she chased fireflies with her Apache playmates, her mixed heritage evident in features that combined the best of both her bloodlines. "I think she'll understand that you chose love over fear, truth over comfort, justice over convenience. Those are lessons that will serve her well, no matter which world she ultimately chooses to live in." "And us?" Elizabeth asked quietly. "Do you think we chose wisely?" Eagle Feather reached over and took her hand, once pale and soft, now bronzed and strong from mountain living. "I think we chose to believe that some bonds are stronger than the circumstances that create them, that some families are formed not by blood alone, but by shared struggle and mutual respect." As night settled over the hidden canyon and the stars emerged in patterns that told ancient stories of love and survival, Elizabeth Morrison, now known to the Apache as Strong Heart Woman, realized that she had found something her privileged upbringing had never offered: a place where she belonged not because of who she had been born to be, but because of who she had chosen to become. The woman who had been abandoned to die in the desert had become a bridge between worlds, proof that even in the harshest circumstances, love could bloom where hatred had once taken root. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that courage comes in many forms and that family is defined by loyalty rather than blood, then you've found your home. Subscribe to Wild West Love Stories for more tales of redemption, transformation, and love that transcends every boundary society tries to build. From desert rescues to mountain sanctuaries, every story we tell proves that the strongest bonds are forged not in comfort, but in the crucible of shared struggle and mutual respect. This is where hearts learn that home is not a place, but a choice to stand together against impossible odds.